On this ITAV show, we look at the new Kracked virus and how it has impacted wireless networks. Also look at a new botnet that is threatening AV and IT networks. All that and more next on the ITAV show.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is ITAV, episode 10, recorded Friday, October 27th, 2017. Victor.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Extron Electronics.
This is the ITAV show brought to you by the fine folks at AVNation. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us to discuss all things IT and AV and how the two kind of merge together. First and foremost, Mr. Derek Jonkus from the fine folks at Extron. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Tim.
Thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it. Also with us, my buddy and pal, an IT consultant extraordinaire. His name is Michael Drainer. He works for a company called Drainer Technologies. I'm not sure how that happened.
Not quite sure. It just kind of fell in my lap.
Yeah. Last but not least, the Grand Poobah extraordinaire, webmaster of AVNation, and he works for Harman International. How are you, sir, Mr. Bradford Ben?
Let's amend that to be, I currently work for Harman International, an AVNation underwriter as a Extron, but in 56 days, 1 hour, 41 minutes, not anyone's counting, I'll be looking for my next big adventure. Send your resumes, send your job offers to tim@avnation.tv, and he'll screen them for me.
I can do that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right, let's kick this. Go ahead.
You're losing control already. You know that, right?
Wirelessly, because we don't want anything getting hacked or cracked on the way.
Well, that's a nice segue into our first story. The article we're going to use is from Fast Company. About a week and a half ago, we're actually right before we started recording our episode before last of Resi Week, the new Krack, Krack, if I can spell correctly, it was a Wi-Fi attack. And I'm going to say virtually because I am not aware of a Wi-Fi system that was not impacted by this, but there may have been one that wasn't impacted. I'm not aware of one, but there may have been somebody who was not impacted by this. But it absolutely exploited a flaw in the WPA2 Wi-Fi encryption system. It is typical. It is it is what 99.9% of Wi-Fi systems are running, and I'm talking about ASUS and Linksys, and the cheapest Wi-Fi you can get, all the way up into the higher end ones. Derek, I'm going to start with you on this. How big of an impact is this, or has this been? We kind of talked a little bit off air beforehand. My Wi-Fi system at home, I use an EOS system, has already been patched. Yours has been patched, Derek. How big of an impact was this?
Well, I think this is one of those things that's one of those equal opportunity hacks. It's a vulnerability that everyone has nearly the same problem with. And WPA2 has been around for a long time. I mean, I remember seeing radios 12 or 13 years ago, I think, around that time frame. They were just starting to have this feature before it was ratified. So it's been around for a long time. But don't worry. The folks that were already using this vulnerability already have what they need. They're already on to something else. So by the time we have it all patched, we'll be on to something else completely.
Yeah, but I disagree a little bit, mainly because of the fact that you have to be in physical proximity to the people, and Wi-Fi in general is relatively localized. So I think while not everyone's patched, not everyone's been able to exploit it yet.
Well,
go ahead, Michael.
No, Bradford's right, but I want to take even a step back from that. In that, this was a lab discovery of a vulnerability. This isn't a exploit that was found in the wild necessarily. That's not to say that it hasn't been exploited in the wild, but this is something that was discovered in a lab. First of all, second, the vast majority of data that is vulnerable is already protected through other layers of encryption. So this is just a deterioration of one of the multiple layers of security that we rely on. Your social security number, your credit card information, your bank account information should already be encrypted.
Well, let's use Equifax.
Well, there's there's that.
No, but you are right, Michael. For instance, my system at the office uses the certificate before the Cisco Radius server will actually let me in off of the Wi-Fi. At home, I'm paranoid and have stuff encrypted. I run a VPN at home. So it's one of those things where, yes, you still need to run multiple levels of security. But as I've been talking with a couple people, I still think the fact that you have to be in close proximity is going to be the biggest thing that's going to keep this from proliferating. However, having said that, let's go to an airport and, see all the devices that are hanging out.
Well, hey, I want to come back to the local part of what you're saying, Bradford. I can walk through my neighborhood and take out my cell phone and just scan.
Yeah.
And see, just see the crazy names that people name their Wi-Fi access. That's not close proximity. I mean, I can see my neighbors.
Well, it
Wi-Fi.
depends on how you define close proximity. How long's a piece of string? For a hacker, are they going to go after Tim Albright, who might have? Well, no, Michael's more successful, so Michael has a quarter. So would they go after Tim?
Boy, are you fooled?
Or would they go after AMX, Harman, Extron, Disney?
But they could sit in.
Well, wait. Though this brings up a very valid point, though. That's the misnomer, though. The misnomer is that they're going to go directly after the big guys, when in reality, what tends to happen is they go after someone who has an association in order to spoof that individual's identity to gain access to the larger entity.
I totally agree with that.
But I think the better place to do that is at a Starbucks, at an airport.
Absolutely.
Because then you can get to the devices and then get to the handheld devices.
So let's take that point there. That being the case, crack is still a non-issue because in those environments, you're running unencrypted wireless anyway.
Right.
It's all in the clear. So either way, you're still dealing with the typical security protocol that you need to take. If you're on a public Wi-Fi that's unencrypted, in other words, you don't have to put in a key for the SSID, you should be using some sort of VPN to encrypt your traffic. Any sensitive information, make sure you're using HTTPS or TLS encryption, and your browser will tell you up at the top what it's doing, because that's an added layer of protection. But Bradford, you're absolutely right. And I saw this firsthand when I was in Vegas recently at a security conference, and the world-renowned hacker Kevin Mitnick did a live demonstration with a backpack AP. You couldn't see it. He set it up as a man-in-the-middle type thing. You connect to it, and immediately he's picking off absolutely everything you're transmitting, and then able to gather information that's passed in the clear. But if your information's already encrypted, you're good.
Yep. Agreed. It's the encryption. And I will actually say Google, Firefox, Apple, and Microsoft are doing a good job of requiring HTTPS, hypertext, transfer protocol secure, because Tim knows I have the rule that you can't use the abbreviation if you don't know the words.
Well, and the other thing is not to go too far down this road. Actually, Google in their SEO in the latest, I think I want to say Penguin update, they're giving more credence to websites that have the S part of the HTTP.
Absolutely.
And that's why AVNation has it. And that's also why sometimes the front page doesn't load if it's calling a non-secure font or something.
So I want to kind of speak to the HTTPS thing real quick. Well, yeah, Derek can talk in a minute.
No, we're good.
I'm totally kidding. Here's the thing, though, and you did bring up a good point on this, that you have to be close. So we're talking about all this public access, right? But the real danger is truly that in the corporate environment, where it's harder to keep tabs on physical security, to keep track of who's coming in and out of your facility. And the fact that a lot of corporate applications tend not to enforce encryption when it's on their own LAN. So
Bingo.
That is where you're going to run into these issues. And that's where big corporate has to watch out. I'm sorry, Derek, go ahead.
No, it's going to be the same thing I was going to mention. I think this just highlights everything that we all know, at least on this call, right? Is that you should be really thinking about creating strata in your network, so that, just because it's something that might be on-premise or in-premise, that you're really thinking about items that are both encrypted. You're thinking about, what should people really have access to. And it just really speaks to, thinking of security in terms of layers, which I think all of us have mentioned already, right? That's really the best practice.
So actually this kind of segues into one of the other discussions. I don't know if you want to go ahead and move into this on the IoT thing, but that segues into the idea of the manufacturers of IoT devices and AV devices that live on the LAN enforcing encryption on the communication of their devices back to whatever they're communicating with.
Actually, we'll just bring up the article now.
So, I want to see more of that go on, because so much of that transmission is done in the clear, leaving vulnerabilities on the devices as well as in the communications.
Well,
I do want to chuck in something really quick as we're changing over, because it applies to both. A lot of people think if they turn off their SSID broadcast, it makes it harder to find their SSID for their wireless. What I'll tell you is it's actually sending a please don't display me SSID. So it's completely worthless. Don't even bother clicking the box unless you want to keep someone, not us, out of your system. Like, say, Tim's son.
Yes. We'll get to that in a second. All right, so let's talk about this. It's a brand new botnet. Hopefully, if you're listening to this show, you understand what a botnet is. It's called the Reaper, and it's targeting IoT devices. Michael's brought up a good point. I have done several talks over the last year about IoT and IoT security. One of the things that's on there is a year ago, most folks, especially listening to this show, remember the DDoS attack that attacked the eastern seaboard and eastern side of the U.S., brought down sites. And in that, Krebs on Security posted the devices that were a part of that botnet. One of those devices was an explicit AV device. It was a speaker. It was a two-way networked speaker. Think about that for a second, right? For every presentation I've done, I've highlighted, and it's a spreadsheet, right? There's names, there's Chinese cameras, there's Chinese DVRs, and in the middle of that is a two-way speaker that every single AV professional would know the name, would recognize the name of this company. And the way that happened, it's not the manufacturer's fault. It is the integrator's fault for not doing something as simple as changing a login and password. Bradford, I'm going to start with you on this because you've been a part of some significant deployments over the last couple of years, especially network devices. How do we get folks that are putting this equipment in that doesn't have to be on the network, but to get full functionality has to be on the network and has to get to the internet proper? How do we explain to them and drill into them that doing some basic security measures is important?
I think the best way I've been drilling it into people when they say, you're being paranoid and, all these other things, I say, okay, hand me your phone unlocked and you'll be fine with that, right? And they're like, well, no. I was like, that's what you're doing if you don't change the password on these things. So change the password on every device. The other thing I've started doing and telling people about is don't do patterns that make sense and don't use dictionaries. So a lot of people do words like, the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy red dog. That is not exactly the best thing to put in because, believe it or not, these same people have lists of common words and common phrases. So you start there and keep going down. With the price of hardware now, computers now, you can do that very quickly very, very quickly. You can go through about a million passcodes in a minute. So start thinking about that. The other thing is I tell people, put in a random one. I use a password generator and a password manager. But the other thing is also to explain to the integrator that in theory, because they're the security provider, if someone really wanted to draw out the lawsuit of who left the door unlocked, that could be the person. It's what we're seeing going on with Equifax. Is it their fault or is it their subcontractor's fault? So that's one thing. The other thing, and this is something that I've asked my current employer to do, and Derek, feel free to take this as a suggestion for any of your IoT devices. After a certain number of login attempts that are wrong, lock the device until you physically go to it and either cycle power or press a reset button. So that will immediately start turning down your random password generators. It's the same idea as Windows locks you out after X amount of times of logging in. Mac does the same thing, especially with that. So to me, that's the two things is the integrator should be asking the manufacturers for a password lockout, but the integrator should also be aware enough of if I don't change this, I'm leaving their door unlocked. And these denial of services are huge.
Well, and actually, Derek, that brings up a good point, and Bradford, you can jump in after this. But Derek, what can manufacturers do? I mean, honestly, I'm not trying to necessarily let manufacturers off the hook, but there's not a whole lot you can do, can you?
I mean, you try to do things like we'll have the right architecture that supports the application of the product, because that has a lot to do with the extent to which you may need to offer a set of services or a set of capabilities that kind of match the deployment strategy that you expect customers to use. I know that in some courses that I've been teaching over the last few years, one of the first things we teach everyone is just about everything we've mentioned. Just first thing, change the password, right? That's such a basic thing that you can do. You probably never willingly leave, your personal identification out and exposed to someone else. But gosh, leaving a phone or leaving another device behind is actually, probably makes you more vulnerable than leaving your front door unlocked in some places nowadays. All right. So as a manufacturer, I think it's on us manufacturers to really give our customers the right kinds of tools so that they can be successful with the products that we're offering. I mean, today, if manufacturers aren't having security discussions, if they don't have a strategy to think about that, they're going to be no better than a lot of these other commodity products that are being compromised. The only problem is, if you've worked probably like any of us have, the places where we put these products probably have something else that's more valuable than the product that has the defect. And as we mentioned earlier, it's just a vector into getting something a little more valuable. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's the concern we need to have, because there's liability with that for the integration community, consultants, and manufacturers, the customers, right? I mean, it gets very messy very, very quick.
The thing I point out to a couple people is I'm trying to remember the manufacturer. They use the MAC address of the device as the default password. It's not foolproof, but it's still pretty good. The other thing is that while people go, well, if they get into my thermostat, what are they going to do? Change the temperature? And it's, if they get into your thermostat, what else can they do coming out of your system in your house? It's the first link, or in your corporate boardroom or any place else. As I tell people, the Target hack that released all that data started in an HVAC system. The most recent attack on a casino in Vegas started on an IP monitoring system for a fish tank. So, you also have to look at how do you keep your network segregated, like we talked about, to keep it secure. But I do agree that the manufacturers need to empower and make people aware of it, as well as putting in some basic safeguards, like it locks you out.
So we're hitting on things that aren't new to the IT industry, right? I mean, these are things that are common disciplines in mainstream IT. But the AV community as a whole, I think, just has not taken the security issue seriously. I think that the manufacturers are, and I think that manufacturers are starting to take steps, but I think your typical integrator just doesn't really understand and comprehend the full weight of what they're really exposing themselves and their clients to. We do an amount of work in healthcare. And you mentioned something, Bradford, about segmenting the network. I would never, ever put an IoT device on the same VLAN that my electronic health record system is on, right? I mean, that's a big no-no, but you would not believe how many times we see AV devices, projectors, video transmitters, audio devices sitting on the same LAN segment as an EHR platform. Big no-no. Right. But it's just understanding that is a major point of breach into a HIPAA violation that can turn into hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines and hundreds of thousands of dollars of legal protection, not just for you, but also for your customer at the end of the day. Regarding the MAC address issue, it seems like a good idea, but a simple ARP request can
Yes.
figure out what that is. So it's not secure.
It's not perfect.
It's
like I
not
said,
perfect, but it's a step the right direction.
It stops the dictionary attacks.
It does. It does. But what I would like to see are some essential things such as syslogging. I want devices to be able to just tell me every time somebody makes a login attempt on that. So it can go to a logging server with every other device in the IT network that goes with all my routers, all my switches, all my servers. And then it brings awareness to the administrators as to, hey, there's an anomaly on the network, right? So even if we don't have all the protections built into the device, just simple notification and awareness goes a long way in helping prevent larger breaches.
Now, there is something you brought up, and this is a vector off of this. Sorry, Derek. Is a lot of times when we're putting in audio systems, they're using digital audio transports or video audio transports. Mm-hmm. If you can get that stream, you can listen in or see the video, which means you still need physical security to not be able to watch the video of a Citibank presentation on what they're doing the next 5 years or listen to it. And Dante, to what they did is they put in a 4-digit PIN. Mm-hmm. Relatively secure, will keep many of us out. Those of us who can program an API will just, it's only 10,000 digits or 10,000 numbers. That's maybe a 20-second crack with the right tools. So this is why I remind people of, you also have to look at what the actual information you're transporting, whether or not that's encoded as well as all these other things. Well, so it's not just the end device.
And I think at the end of the day, and I think that the 3-4 of us here are all in agreement on this one, it is all about awareness, because it's not going to happen to me mentality. It's such a slim chance that that's going to happen that I really don't need to worry about it. You are so sadly mistaken, and you are going to make the next headline.
Yeah. Now, since I'm looking at the clock, because Tim told me I have to keep it under a half an hour, I want to make sure Derek gets some words in edgewise, because you have the unfortunate situation of being on a show with me and Michael.
I don't know how unfortunate that is. I feel pretty fortunate, actually.
Okay.
The only other thing we can say is about these, when you compromise many, many devices, which is kind of the real threat here of this botnet is, and we've seen before, others can take control of those devices and sort of use them at their will to create other kinds of havoc. So it's sometimes it's just not the value of what the vector is. It's like, okay, if I combine all these assets into something that I can use as an offensive weapon, right? I could just kill your ability to communicate with something that's important to you, right? From a network perspective, from an internet perspective. And that's what we saw. And just to go back to what Tim said earlier, Krebs on security, he had a great article about what we can expect potentially from this burgeoning botnet after the experiences we had, just a little over a year ago. So, we can't forget that, right? Not only does, maybe someone just lurking in your router, but at any given time, they can turn that up, turn that down. If they actually have that ability to compromise it, they kind of can control it.
And that's scary.
The fortunate thing is a lot of these products are made, there might be OEM'd, for example, which isn't a bad thing, but sometimes, a defect or vulnerability is passed between devices. And one thing that affects one product all of a sudden could affect a sea of products. Maybe they're using the same kind of chip, same kind of technology. So at that point, it becomes very hard to manage. And I think that's the difficult part. That's the difficult part.
Yeah, absolutely. That actually is going to be a really good place to stop. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Mr. Bradford Ben, how do people get a hold of you if they want to hire you in 56 days?
Let's see. So I should say you can still contact Harman. I'm still there. I'm finishing out my times. So that's bradford.ben@harman.com, or just go to bradfordben.rocks on the internet. Yes, bradfordben.rocks on the internet, and it's there. Cool. Or bradfordben.com, bradfordben.net, bradfordben.info. But I think the bradfordben.rocks is
and Ninja.
The appropriate one. And I'm a ninja. I'm also bradfordben.ninja. I'm on the Twitters at bradfordben. On the LinkedIn as Bradford Ben. As I tell people, if you can't find me by Googling me, I don't really want to talk to you.
Makes sense.
He has the SEO #1 spot for Bradford Ben.
He does. All right, Mr. Michael Drainer, how do people find you?
DrainerTechnologies.com or at Michael Drainer on Twitter.
All right, and Mr. Derek Jonkus, thank you so much, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you. You can find me at extron.com. You can give me a call on the phone, or you can email me, djonkus@extron.com.
All right. My name is Tim Albright. Don't follow me on the Twitters, but go by the website if you would please, AVNation.tv, AVNation.tv. You'll find this program and a host of others. We have 2 weeklies that look at the news of the week for the commercial and the residential space in AV. One is called AV Week. One is called Resi Week. They post every week. Also a host of others. Also, while you're there, check out our underwriters section. These are the folks that support us financially, help us do what we do. Extron is one of those, and Harman is as well. So we thank them for their support. As you're listening to this, we will be in New York for New York Digital Signage Week. So we'll look for that. We're doing actually 2 live shows, and we're also recording AV Week there from New York. So all that and more at AVNation.tv, AVNation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the ITAV Show.